Right, so this section's essentially going to be about what happens when a network goes wrong or there's a security breach or something like that. So basically, the recovery plan, what's going to happen when they try and recover all the data that's lost or, recover everything that's gone wrong in it. And there's quite a few things to talk about in here. And what I'm going to do is mention a few things, well, one thing in particular and a few variants of that one thing. But you'll need to also sort of mention that things like backups, for example, would be in your IT disaster recovery plan. So if something were to go wrong, you've got backups which you could use for, your recovery. But you've also got to think of like what else could they potentially use. Now you could research that, or you could think about like what they could put in place if something does go wrong. But I'll mention a little bit about it here anyway. I'm just saying to you guys that you might need to think about this also a little bit. So, obviously, if the system fails and your network system goes wrong, even if it's security breach or even if it's just that say it loses power or something like that and becomes corrupt, like it's not just about it being secure. It could just be something goes wrong just because there's a fault somewhere. Obviously, you need to plan what happens in that scenario because, in more likelihood, it's inevitable. I imagine every big company has gone through it. I imagine big companies like Google and Microsoft have had this at some point where they've had a complete network failure and they've had to fix it. I remember years ago there was issues with like say Xbox Live, which is obviously Microsoft systems, where it had all gone down. I imagine they had to have an IT recovery plan in order to get it back up and running. So there's all sorts of stuff where I imagine if you look out there, there will be news about companies having total failures and what they did to fix said failures. So it's obviously something that they need to plan for. Now, one thing I'm going to talk about, essentially in these videos, is hot sites and the sort of variants of hot sites. So, hot sites are essentially complete duplicates of your working system that you've got running now. So, say for example, a company like eBay, they will have network systems where obviously you can go on, you can buy something, then obviously it'll go through all their systems, all the secure transaction stuff for PayPal and what have you, and then you'll be able to put, place an order for your product, and the person who you've placed the order with will see it, and then obviously deliver you something. Now, obviously, there's a lot of network systems in that because obviously there's a lot of steps. If that was to go down for whatever reason, obviously the website might go completely, or your order that you tried to put in on eBay might have disappeared because it was on a database that's become corrupt or something like that. And if the whole thing's become corrupt and you can't use it anymore, so say like the entire network system has gone, what are they going to do? Now, a hot site is a complete duplicate of your network system that you've got running. So if it does go down, you can then literally run to the other one and turn it on and be like, right, we're just going to use this, and it'll all work fine again. Obviously, you need to use a backup in that, so you've got all the networking equipment and systems all configured, ready to go. You'd put the backup in to get it restored, and then that's it. You can just start going again. Obviously, that's a really useful disaster recovery plan to have. The issue with that, though, is that obviously it's very expensive because you've got a whole system running that you're not using until something goes wrong. So you're having to keep it powered, and they will keep it powered just in case. And it's not doing anything, so it'll cost you a lot of money just to keep there and keep it maintained and keep it running in the case of something going wrong. But obviously, because it's ready at a moment's notice, it's good for a lot of big companies because they can spend money on that, and then if something does go wrong, it's right, turn that on and let's just keep going from that. And obviously they can be back up within a matter of seconds, essentially, potentially in some cases. It depends on how they do the backups. So it's interesting to think about in terms of who would want to use this, and obviously how expensive it is, and obviously it's going to be big companies. Really, small companies are not going to use this. Now, one of the offshoots of that is a cold site. So you have a building that has internet connectivity and you have power to it, but you have nothing inside of it at all. No equipment, no backups, no nothing. But obviously it can all still be set up. So you might have all the networking equipment, it's just not all set up and running. It's essentially just there, just sat dark and not being ran. Now, there's something called a recovery time objective, an RTO. That's how long it can be from your network going down to it going back up again and running. So this has a longer RTO than a hot site, because a hot site you could potentially get it working within minutes, if not seconds, depending on how it's set up. Whereas a cold site, you need to turn it all on, make sure it's all working, then put the backup on. It's still a bit quicker than obviously doing it from complete scratch, but it's still a bit longer than using a hot site for it. So it's something to think about in terms of, is this more viable for smaller companies? Because then if something does go wrong, they can then switch over to it. It won't take as long, and obviously they've got a backup plan, but obviously it's going to take longer for it to all get up and running. And again, for companies, time is money. Warm sites, as daft as it sounds, yes, there is a warm site, so it's between hot and cold. These will have the hardware in place, but obviously don't have it running. So cold sites don't have anything running. They don't got it set up at all. They have to go in, they have to set up everything, and buy all the equipment potentially as well. Whereas with a warm site, the equipment's already there, it's ready, but it's not turned on as such. So obviously it's quicker than a cold site, because some of the stuff's there, and they don't have to wait on things coming in and be set up. But obviously they need to switch it all on, make sure it works, and put the backup in just to make sure that it's all up and running. So it's something to think about anyway. So basically I've talked about hot, warm and cold sites, which sounds a bit daft, but they are real things. But I want you guys to also think about, what other recovery plans could there be if something goes wrong? And I'm not asking for anything ridiculous. I'm more just thinking, so say you have a small network, and say for example their website goes down but the rest of it's running. What would be the recovery plan for that? And it might just be that you've got another server set up ready and waiting to go, or you have two servers running at the same time with the same website on. If one goes down, you just run it off the other one, or something like that. It's just another idea in terms of what they could use, and then you've got to think about the costs and time and stuff to set it up, and how long the RTO would be for stuff like this. So would it be a matter of hours? Would it be a matter of minutes? Would it be a matter of weeks? Depending on what you use. I just want you to think about different ways. And you can research that, or you can come and ask me, obviously. I don't mind you coming and asking and chatting to me about it. We'll probably have a chat about it anyway at some point. But yeah, so IT disaster recovery plans essentially is, how does a network recover from a complete disaster? That's why it's called disaster recovery plan. So that's essentially it for the first part of physical security and plans to fix your system if it goes wrong. I'll talk about policies and procedures in another set of videos, which again is part of your P5. But this has essentially been the first part of the P5 task for IT system security.